Good afternoon, students. Let's say I gave you this equation, y equals 3x minus 2, and I wanted you to graph it. How would you do it? Miss Walker, we don't know this. I don't, what? There's letters and numbers. Like, what do you mean? How, graph? What? I just know how to graph points. Okay, well, in this video, I'm going to show you how we can graph a linear function. If I was to graph this equation, it would make points on a coordinate plane that would connect, if I connected those dots, it would make a straight line. Because if you remember from the last video, this is our standard formula for a linear function, for a straight line graph, okay? Minus the 3 and minus the 2. This is the standard formula. We could plug in different numbers for 3 and 2, right? The number that's next to the x value is known as our slope. And the number that is on its own, while in an equation is a constant, in the linear form for a graph is where the line is going to cross the y-axis, also known as the y-intercept. So the first thing I would like for you to do in this video is I am going to kind of let you copy down the notes template for today, so that way you can have everything set up. So I would suggest just copying the top part first. So maybe split your page into like a third, and then the bottom 2/3 will be their own thing. So here's what the top third is going to look like. We're going to go over the steps for how to graph a linear formula. So go ahead and pause your video and kind of get this top part set up. Okay, now I want you to get the bottom part set up. So you can draw yourself a line, and then these are the two examples we're going to do. We are going to create an X and Y table, and then we're going to graph the X and Y table. So these are kind of what the coordinate planes should look like. If you want to make this one look more symmetrical like this one, that is also fine. So pause and copy this down. All right, let's get into these steps for how we graph the standard form of a line. So the first thing we're going to need to do to graph anything, we need points, right? Like we literally can't graph anything unless we know what our X and Y values are. So in an equation, a linear equation or the formula, they don't tell us what X and Y are. However, on a graph, we can pick any X and Y values that we want. Particularly, we're going to choose values for X, and then we're going to plug it in to this equation or to this formula, and that'll tell us what the corresponding Y value is for this particular line. So the first thing we're going to do is choose X values and make a table, like an XY table, not like a physical table that I'm have my notebook on right now. So we're going to choose X values and make a table. It is really important that you choose positive and negative values. Okay. If you choose only positives, your line is not going to go, it's only going to maybe be in one quadrant of your coordinate plane. So if you choose positive and negatives, it'll kind of take up the entire coordinate plane. The other thing is you need to choose at least 3 points. Or values, because technically we're just choosing X values. So you need to choose at least 3 X values, because remember in one of the videos, I said 2 points makes a line. Like you just need 2 points to connect the dots and make a line, but 3 points makes a more specific, more defined line. So you need to choose at least 3 values. So that's the first step. The next thing you're going to do is solve for Y by plugging in. So plug in and solve for Y. In the standard formula, they tell us if we do something with X and the other numbers, we will figure out what the Y value is. So we're going to just plug in the X values we get and solve for Y. Then the next thing we're going to do is we'll basically have a list of coordinates at that point. You'll see what it looks like when we make the table. So the last thing we're going to just do is graph the coordinates on our coordinate plane. Okay, so it's a 3-step process. When you do the actual math, it's more than just 3 steps, but these are kind of the 3 generic steps for what we need to do. So let's look at our 2 examples. Okay, we are going to do this example first, and we'll do this one second. So we have the formula y equals 3x minus 2. So first thing I need to do is choose values to plug in for X. So I have to choose positive and negative values. My 3 favorite values to plug in for X when I am trying to graph a line are the following: -1, 0, and +1. I've got a positive, I've got a negative, and I've got 0. So I can kind of figure out like what's going to happen at the origin of this graph. Or like around one of the axes, basically. So those are the 3 that I like to choose. You can choose whatever numbers you want. I also like to keep them small to make the math easier and to make when I graph a lot easier too, right? -1, 1, and 0 are all kind of close to the origin. So when it comes to graphing, I'm probably not going to have to go up in the top corner or over off to the side. Like it'll be kind of relatively contained. So again, you can choose any numbers you want. I personally just like to choose these and need to make sure you include at least 1 negative. You can do more than 1 negative if you want, but at least 1. Okay. So the way I'm going to figure out what the Y value is I'm going to go plug in my X value and solve. So for the first one, if I plug in -3, I have 3 times -1 minus 2. Okay. So if I were to solve this, 3 times -1 is -3. -3 minus 2 is going to be -5. So when X is equal to -1 in this particular formula, Y is going to be equal to -5. Now let me go plug in 0. So I have 3 times 0 minus 2. Well, 3 times 0 is 0. 0 minus 2 is -2. So when X is 0, Y is -2. This is going to be where our line crosses the y-intercept. And then let me plug in 1. I have 3 times 1 minus 2. 3 times 1 is 3. Minus 2 is going to be 1. Okay. So when X is 1, Y is 1. So now I have 3 coordinates. I have X and Y pairs. I could write them off to the side like they're ordered pairs if I wanted to. I'm not going to, but you could. Now I'm going to go graph. And when I graph these points, it should make a straight line if I connect the dots. If it doesn't, then that probably means I did the math wrong somewhere here. Okay. So I'm going to pause and do this off camera. If you do not know how to plot points on the coordinate plane, I suggest you go back and watch one of our previous videos, ask somebody at your table, or go double check with your teacher real quick. Okay, so I have plotted my points. I did not connect them yet, but you can see they're going to make a straight line. Now, when I freehand and connect the dots, it might not look like the straightest line. Yeah, not the straightest, but it is what it is. Okay, so this is the equation y equals 3x minus 2 on a graph. So now if I went back to the original question, hey, take this and graph it. Okay, this is how you do it. You basically plug in points to pick for X, plug them in to get your Y values, and then plot those points that you come up with, and it should make a straight line. Okay, and you'll notice that if we go back to what we know about the standard formula, our y-intercept should be -2. That means this line should cross the y-axis at -2, and it does. Right here, that point 0, -2 kind of makes it so where it crosses. The slope of this line is 3. Okay, and we're going to talk in a whole video about slope, about like the number and how it relates to how flat or how steep a line is. But the higher that the number is in the positives, the more, or the negatives, the more steep the line is, the more close it is to being like almost a vertical line. Okay, so let's do another example. This one's a little different because this one, they give us that just y equals 2. There's no X, there's no like y-intercept. This is literally just y equals 2. The standard form here is kind of non-existent, okay? So what this means purely is that basically y is going to be equal to 2. No matter what value we put for X, the y value is always going to be 2. So we can pick the same numbers again, -1, 0, and +1. There is literally no formula here for us to plug in. Basically, this, when it has X equals 2, this means no matter what you put in for X, the Y value is going to be 2. That's it, period. So like if we go graph this, it's going to make a straight line, but here's what it looks like. We have -1 and 2. So that's going to go right here. 0 and 2 is going to go right here. And then 1 and 2 is going to go right here. And if I kept going, I would still get values of 2. So this makes a perfectly horizontal line where the y value is 2. So that's what this particular graph looks like. So if you see something where it's just y equals a number and they say, hey, graph that, that literally is just going to make a horizontal line. If this was y equals 6, then we would have a horizontal line, but we would have it up here at 6 because no matter what the x value is, the y value would be 6. If we had y equals -2, it would be a perfectly horizontal line, but down here at -2. Okay. And what that means then, what if they give you like just the x value? Okay. So if they give you like x equals something, okay, that's going to make a perfectly vertical line. Because no matter what the y value is, the x value is always going to be whatever, and it'll make a perfectly vertical line. So that's kind of a unique thing about when we graph from an equation is if they just give you a number, either x or y to graph, it's going to make either a perfectly horizontal or a perfectly vertical line. If they give you it in the standard form, it's going to give you something that looks like this. Sometimes the line might go kind of at this angle. That's called a negative slope. So that's going to have to do with the fact that our slope is negative. We'll get more into the different types of slope in its own video, but remember the 3-step process. Plug in your values for x, solve to get your y values, and then take those coordinates and graph them on your coordinate plane to see what kind of line or how your line looks. That is how we graph from the standard formula for a linear function. Okay, so you have 3 practice questions. These are the 3. I want you to graph the following: y equals 2x plus 4, y equals -1, and x equals -3. So these are like the first example we did. These are like the second example we did. So you might need to give yourself a little bit more space or just draw your coordinate planes off on the side. For this, you will need to just get, if you want to check your answer, check your teacher's notebook or check with the people at your table to make sure you guys all have the same line. The actual graph image will not be on the table of contents, just a description of kind of how the line will look will be in the table of contents. So if you want to visualize what the correct answer is, check with your teacher, or you could check with other people that you're working with in your class. If you have any questions, please feel free to reach out and have an awesome day. Goodbye.